In this video, I'm going to tell you how I like to think about bracing for rotation or transferring your linear momentum into rotational power. This is something I wish I thought about in this way sooner, because bracing for rotation is not the same as bracing to stop your forward momentum and or change directions. Also, very important, the brace is not, when you do this knee extension, notice my head is staying at the same level roughly, okay? So we're not standing up on the leg. That's slow, there's a lot of weight, and it's much harder to do explosively. Like, I feel some weight, but it's not the same weight as standing your whole body weight up.
Just move your knee from west to east powerfully by extending it without standing up.
The weaker, slower, spinny style of throwing. Watch the brace leg. And the whole body's kind of spinning together. I no longer even think about bracing to stop my momentum. I just think about bracing to rotate, and my momentum stops as a consequence of that. And I'm able to more efficiently power up my rotation this way, because instead of bracing and trying to stop my momentum, all that power that was used to try to stop my momentum first is first going into powering up my rotation, and then my momentum is stopping. All right, so here I'm going to run up faster
Than I normally do.
and I'm going to have zero thought or intention of stopping my momentum, and I'm only going to just try to move my knee in this direction, west to east, when I'm running up north. And we'll see if I tumble over my brace or not. That's a flippy disc, it's still rolling. Oh my gosh, it's through the back of the field. So who will this help? Basically, I think this could help anybody who's thinking about the brace in kind of the typical ways that a lot of people think about the brace. But in particular, I think this can help people who have a form which I call overly spinny. Spinning is like a weaker, slower way of rotating. So like there's powerfully rotating, and then there's spinning. And the people who spin, they usually keep their knee bent, and then they just rotate like this, kind of. Everything is slow and rotating together, and you're just spinning on your foot. A lot of times they're not on the heel, they're spinning kind of on the front of the foot, and so you're not utilizing this ground force to power up your rotation, you're just using the ground as something to spin on. And also, people who tip too much, tip forward and backwards too much, instead of rotating around like a pole through your body. Now that pole can be leaning backwards, that's how you throw upwards, but you're rotating around the pole still that's leaning this way. Or if you were throwing very down, then you could be leaning this way, but you're still rotating around this pole through your body that's leaning. You're not tipping it one way and the other, which interferes with your ability to rotate at full speed. Because when you start bracing for rotation, it's naturally going to straighten this leg, and that's naturally going to make you then want to pivot on the heel, which naturally makes you just want to rotate on this more pure axis. The main cue is very simple. If we think about the run-up as being north, whichever direction you're running is north, that means this way is west and this way is east. You're running up north, and when your brace lands, all you're going to do is move your knee from west to east. That's it. And you don't even really have to think about rotating. If you coil well, then that will power up your rotation, and you will then want to kick in some extra, like, core power to start rotating once you feel that brace get it going. So in a sense, it feels like instead of trying to brace from north to south to stop my forward momentum, I'm just bracing sideways is kind of what it feels like, instead of going against my momentum. Extend this knee this way. That's where you get that really good diagonal leg very quickly. The diagonal comes very quickly when you do it like this, when you just extend the knee to move the knee in that direction towards the back of your knee, versus if you're trying to stop all this forward momentum, you're pushing against that momentum and the brace knee is extending slower because there's all this momentum you're resisting, versus immediately we want to rotate clockwise, whereas this, just extend the knee back, is not immediately having to fight all of your forward momentum, and it is very aligned with getting your pelvis to rotate. So the knee goes back and the right hip gets pushed back with it. The way it stops your forward momentum then is your pelvis is turned back slightly in a good coil, and this whips your pelvis around, and now I can't keep rotating anymore, and when my knee goes back like this, it's driving all my weight into my heel, and all this rotation has started, so automatically the heel is going to pivot now, and now all that knee extension is pushing me more kind of like southeast, but it's south enough to be very quickly stopping your forward momentum. So you can think about there being like something behind your knee, like a rope or like a TheraBand, and it's pulling your knee this way, and you're trying to completely overpower it. Or alternatively, you can think about there being something else behind your knee that is kind of like heavy, and you're trying to, boom, like knock it over. Now, I will still step forward off the front of the T-pad sometimes, but it's less about there being leftover forward momentum and more about there being, fast rotation that is going into the follow through. And so the forward momentum stops, but then my body is still rotating. And so the left leg swings around and steps forward as part of the follow through. Now, in order for your brace like this to be able to power up your rotation effectively, you need to have hip to shoulder separation. And I think it's good to have your hips turned back a little bit. It gives you like more rotational runway to accelerate on. The problem is when people turn their hips back is their shoulders and their hips are turning together, and then they do not add on the shoulder separation on top of that. And or when they turn their hips back, they just turn their feet backwards. And so the hips turning back don't have any tension in them between like the ground through your feet and your hips. If you stand here like this, and you can have your back foot back a little bit, like 45 degrees, that's fine. On your front foot, your knee, it's actually, I think, good for your knee to come back like this, which is going to lift your heel and pivot, because that'll help you turn the pelvis back. And you'll feel in the rear hip here and through the ground, you'll feel tension on the ground. You see my foot going like this? That's why people want to turn their foot backwards, because it relieves that tension. If you relieve that tension, then you're missing out on the power you can get from that tension, that coiled tension. All right, so the reason hip to shoulder separation is so important with the brace in this way is because if I turn my pelvis back like this, but my shoulders are just with my pelvis, there's no separation, it doesn't matter how fast I power up my brace here, my pelvis just turned forward, but my shoulders kind of stayed back, because without there being any separation, the pelvis can turn forwards, and now I have separation. The pelvis is forward, is more forward, and my shoulders are back like this, and the pelvis is more forward like this. So they've just separated, but I lost like all the power that went into from my brace driving the pelvis forward was lost because it just went into separating between my hips and my shoulder. So what we want is the pelvis is turned back a bit, and now I get all that separation out. There's now no slack. So now as soon as my pelvis turns, there's no separation available to be used up. So it drags the shoulders with the pelvis turning. So that's how the brace rotating the pelvis can explosively accelerate the shoulder rotation. And so notice I haven't said anywhere like flick your hips or whatever. You don't need to do that, because the brace, just driving that brace knee like this, will turn the pelvis more powerfully than if you just try to flick it like this. So in terms of drills, I think one way to feel this is to kind of do like a one step, but instead of just stepping forward, to actually step out kind of diagonally with more stagger. Not because I'm not saying you should have that much stagger, but in this drill, stepping out diagonally is going to make you feel like you want to go against that momentum this way and drive your knee back into that knee extension, which will drive your weight back onto your heel. When people go forward, it's like they think that they have to then go backwards to stop the momentum. So this is kind of like a little way to just cue and feel like, oh, I'm going this way, I need to push that way. So you could practice doing shadow swings, holding the disc like this and whooshing it. You can use a pickleball paddle, and I would just kind of do like a coil here, reach back, some separation, and then kind of push back, bounce on my back foot like this. And now I'm gonna step out and stagger, and then just drive the knee back and whoosh the disc through the air. Do shadow swings like that, and then you can warm up with shadow swings like that even, and then you can do some actual throws like that. So this is coil, pelvis back, now hip to shoulder separation, extend the elbow, reach back, and now I'm paused here, and now I'm doing like a one step. So it's like a coil pause one step drill. I have a full video on the coil pause. I'll link in the description. And this just makes it really easy to not have to think about all the coiling and stuff if you're not already, if you don't already have that, you know, fully ingrained in muscle memory. It could be hard to focus on your brace while you're also trying to figure out how do I do the separation. If you already have the separation, then you can do this more dynamically, just going like this and then coiling and reaching back as you're striding out like that. For the people who don't already have that in muscle memory, then I would recommend practicing this coil pause setup position and now doing this. And you can take this into the X step as well by going like this, which is something I see Simon do, is as your X step is coming back, you push with your right knee, you push kind of back into your X step. So now you're coming kind of diagonally like this, getting your weight into your X step, and that helps you balance on your X step. And now as you coil, you're then going back the other way into the stagger. So it's this kind of curving. We're gonna curve to the right and then back to the left. So right and then that way. I have a video on this where I tested it out with the tech disc called Curvy Runup, and in that video I had some of my highest speed throws at the time. They're still just like 1 mile per hour below my max, and I think part of the reason for it was at the time I was still kind of thinking about the brace as pushing backwards against my forward momentum, and doing this more kind of curving action that resulted in me kind of bringing my weight out more this way just naturally made me want to start bracing more like this. So I was talking to Blitz a while back when his piston drill video came out. I don't remember exactly in the piston drill video how much he talks about the brace mechanics directly, so it's not necessarily the topic of the video. It just kind of came up when he was telling me to try the piston drill and trying to describe something about it to me, and I wasn't understanding. And then I was like, well, if I do this, then how am I gonna like not just stand up, you know, go like this, you know, with your knee. And so I started focusing on it more after that, and then realizing, I was like, wait, I felt this before. I think the Curvy Runup thing, because of me kind of coming out later into this stagger, made me start doing that. So that tied some things together. About the brace that I have an issue with and could improve, which is like how squishy the brace is or how bent the knee is. Brace is striding forward and the foot lands. If the knee bends first, it's kind of squishy, and then you're extending out of that. Versus as soon as the foot lands, it's already kind of ready to go and not squishing down first. And you're more powerful when the knee is not as bent. Trying to think about that, like for me, I always, for some reason, just kind of waited passively until I felt my foot land, and then I would brace powerfully from there. And it worked pretty well. I got pretty good speeds. But lately I've been thinking about stopping that squish in the knee and having it more like pre-engaged and ready to extend as soon as the foot lands on the ground. And when I start thinking about that in a session, I usually start getting up to my higher speeds more easily. You don't necessarily need to extend the knee 100%. When doing this drill, your body may be afraid that you're going to lock your knee and hurt it, and so it may try to kind of limit you from doing that. But I've never actually felt like I locked my knee too hard. No matter how hard I try, it just feels like I'm powering up my rotation more, and I never fully lock the knee in a way that hurt. Paul McBeth actually quite often does look like he's kind of pivoting more in the front of the foot. But the reason he can do it is because he's doing it on his shots where he doesn't need full power, and for whatever reason, I guess he got in the habit where it feels more controlled for him to do that on those lower power shots, and maybe he likes the feeling of, you know, getting down lower or something. But if you see his full power shots, then you'll see his knee, instead of going like this, is much more doing that.
I can't comprehend.
Paul gets it to flip up. I actually love the angle and the height. Does it swing?
That is
That's good.
boomed.